All right, everybody's seated. So good evening, everyone. This is the time and place set for the special meeting of the Royal Oak Planning Commission to hear a presentation of our zone drafting consultant. I hope I used the right word there. And we'll call the meeting to order, and we'll have everybody on this side of the table introduce themselves for the record, starting down at the end there with Commissioner Douglas.
Charlene Douglas.
Joseph Murphy, Director of Planning.
Josh Markham, City Attorney's Office.
Woody Gantina, City Commissioner.
Jim Ellison.
Mike Fournier, Mayor. Welcome.
And I'm Gary Casada. I'm the chairperson, and here comes Mr. Cooper. We'll have him put his statement on the record when he gets here. But we'll warm up by saying what we're going to do here is we've given everybody 60 minutes. And I think Mr. Murphy is going to tell you that you can present for 40, 45 minutes and give us some time for some questions. We will probably do it that way. Mr. Cooper, just for the record, put your appearance on.
Brian Cooper.
All right, thank you. Mr. Murphy, any further introduction?
I think you stole all my thunder. You didn't steal any of theirs.
All right.
But we'll ask to have the monitors in the room changed over to the side monitor so that the consultant can start their presentation.
All right, and before we start, does any of the commissioners have any thing to add, comments, or are we ready to go? All right, so this is Clarion. Please come on up, introduce your team, and give us your presentation.
We're going to play musical mics this evening. Hi, I'm Elizabeth Garvin. I'm a director with Clarion Associates in our Denver office. We have offices in Denver and Chapel Hill, North Carolina. We will introduce ourselves on an upcoming slide, but we thank you for inviting us here on this very lovely evening outside. Thank you for making the snow slow down just a little bit. Whatever you guys did for that was great. Okay, so my question first is, where do I aim the clicker?
Anywhere.
Anywhere?
Yeah.
Okay, like that. How about that? Okay. This evening, we are going to do some introductions, project overview. We're going to talk about the drafting process. We'll touch on engagement. We have some slides on our mapping and AI search processes, and then we'll close and listen to your questions and answer them to the best of our ability. All right, here's our team who's with us this evening. And so these are our specialty leads. Everyone sitting at the table with us this evening brings a particular piece of knowledge and experience to the table. So I am Elizabeth with the picture that I hate but I can't get rid of. I'm an attorney and planner, and I would be the principal in charge of the project, which means all big problems would be mine. All smaller problems will be solved by people on our team. What else would I do? I would be working with project engagement, project management, high-level drafting. The role I usually play is crucial conversations or tough conversations. Sometimes when you're making changes to a code, you bump into things that you really got to talk out with people. So that's the role I typically play. And then as an attorney, I would provide some legal advice, but we're going to turn to Chris, our Michigan attorney, to dial us in correctly to that approach. I have a colleague, Gabby Hart, who's on here. She would be the project manager. We decided to go with the five of us this evening. If you select us, you'll get to meet Gabby. She's really great at this. And I'm going to turn to Leslie, then David, Chris, and then Wayne to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Leslie Oberholzer. I'm with Codometrics. I'm in Evanston, Illinois, which is just north of Chicago. I made the trip today, which was actually just fine. It was a kind of a nice ride. I am the form-based code sort of focus for the team, and I'll be talking to you about that in just a little while. I've been writing form-based codes for about 20 years. And I serve on the steering committee for the Form-Based Code Institute, and I have done so for about a decade. We are now called the Center for Zoning Solutions, in case you hear of that later. I've got dozens of form-based codes adopted all over the place. I think my first one that I worked on was here, and actually the first two I worked on were here in Michigan.
Good evening. I'm David Jurasic. I'm the owner and principal of Horizon Community Planning. My company is based out of Grand Rapids and been established for about 7 years. Before that, I was with a couple different companies within Michigan, Western Michigan mostly, but also Safe Built LSL, who had an office here in Royal Oak. So I've have about 13 years of Michigan-based planning and zoning experience. Before that, I did 10 years in the public sector, worked myself all the way up to a planning director role. And going back further in time, I got my master's from University of Cincinnati in 2003. So my company, Horizon Community Planning, we do kind of the full spectrum of the zoning planning and administration type of work. I write master plans. I probably do usually about two a year. Code work, I usually do about 2 zoning codes a year, mostly smaller than the scope that we're working on today. And then I do maybe the last third of my work is plan review. So just like Mr. Murphy, I write a lot of staff reports. I review a lot of developments. I serve as a planner of record for a handful of communities, as well as a zoning administrator for a few as well. So I bring the perspective of the everyday, every week reviewer and process expert to this process as well.
Chris Patterson with Bay Shields, Burzig Roads. And interesting, we're located in Lansing. Our firm's actually about a size of 42, but we have approximately 19 lawyers dedicated to just our municipal practice. We serve units throughout really Lower Peninsula all the way up to the Upper Peninsula. And I run that group. And one of the particular things that I found over the last 15 years of doing it, my passion has sort of been zoning and planning. And so in doing that, I've been recognized in best lawyers for purposes of municipal law. I've also had the privilege of sort of being one of the few, at least in Michigan, of briefing a pretty nuanced issue related to the intersection of both the Second Amendment and zoning. It was something kind of new. We've got one of the first cases that have come out across the country on that. And then in my free time, which I have quite a bit, obviously, in private practice, I teach at the MSU College of Law. I'm an adjunct professor and teach zoning and planning there. And then we're sort of regularly staying on top of all of the new zoning updates. So I do teaching, webinars, publish an annual e-letter on all the new sort of hot zoning cases you should be paying attention to. And those really are the pieces that we sort of enjoy bringing to this kind of process when we work on a team like this. So I do appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you.
My name is Wayne Childs, Director of Technical Solutions for General Code. We are your incumbent codification service provider. We already host your municipal code. We've done so since 2003. General Code is a not-for-profit subsidiary of the International Code Council. There are many interesting developments that are occurring right now as a part of this being a part of ICC. There are a lot of really interesting technological and content and subject matter expertise that we can bring into the community development process. So much more than just traditional codification services. My background, my educational background, professional background is all kinds of technical publishing, web design, graphic design, but I do also have a passion for planning and zoning. I serve as the chairman of the planning board for the village and town of Lima, New York.
We start with the end. Why would you choose our team? We know we're the third team interviewing for this particular project, and we wanted to share with you some of the reasons why we feel like we could be a good fit for Royal Oak. One of the things that we pride ourselves on, and everyone on this team has worked together on something previously. Let me grab the mic. As much as I have a theater voice, I'm probably not getting it out there. We focus on collaboration. We're not going to come in and tell you this is the correct model and that all we're just going to do is make it work in Royal Oak. We have conversations, we listen, and then we work to resolve issues within the code. We certainly come to it with a list of things that we think could be improved, but we also know that it's through ongoing conversations with the elected and appointed officials in the community that we figure out where the deepest problems are and how we can go about fixing that. Across this table here, we have decades of code drafting experience. I've been doing this for about 30 years. Leslie volunteered 20. Everyone else probably started working when they were 10, so they're probably at about 10 years now. So we do that. As David pointed out, our firms also do master and comprehensive plan creation. That's important because we have a good idea on how the policy process works and how we turn policy into implemented regulations. Our Michigan team members both have drafted and defended Michigan land use codes. We have, across the board, applied and enforced codes. So working in different positions, we understand what it's like on the far end of the drafting, what happens when stuff goes through the review process, or when you need to get your enforcement team out there and the code doesn't support what you're trying to enforce. And then finally, kind of, like a marriage, for better or worse, we stick with our clients through adoption. Hopefully, it's a happy, smooth path. These days, it can be a little bumpy. But we think that the point where the public really gets involved and we're talking about hard conversations, deep stuff, that's when it's worth hanging on and getting to the end. So just to give you an overview of our project, we've read the master plan, we've looked through the code, we've looked through other information from the city. So we start with a project vision, and we, as we get going in the project, we turn this into project goals, because we want to be able to refer back throughout the project to what we set out to do. In a project that runs, longer than a year, people can get lost. So we want to be able to say regularly, here's what we're up to. So we would start by saying, here's our vision, and we would, work with everyone to turn these into goals. Certainly modernize the zoning ordinance, establish legally sound regulations that deliver predictable outcomes for both applicants and staff and elected officials. Implement the master plan, focusing on some of the key things in the plan. So that's housing opportunities, neighborhood character, the review and approval process, sustainability in the climate and climate action, economic viability of commercial employment areas, and incorporating all types of mobility. And then improve the ease of administration for staff and for applicants. Sometimes administration is kind of that piece that we're like, yeah, we'll do that at the end. It's no big deal. It is actually a really big deal, particularly when you're trying to get to housing, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So who are our stakeholders? People at the dais are some of our stakeholders. People within the city are some of our stakeholders. And future residents of Royal Oak. You talk about that in the master plan. Where are people coming in, going to live? We've been in a housing crunch in Colorado for about 4 years now. We also talk about where are our kids going to live and where are our parents going to live as they make changes in their lives, and where do our important service providers live? And so we need to speak with the city and the community, but we also need to use the plan and think through the code to understand what the future of the city is going to be in terms of regulation. So our drafting process, we kind of ladder it up. So we start with project initiation. We kind of do kickoff meetings, and we talk to everybody who's super excited about it, get preliminary ideas, put together some issues, turn that into an assessment report. So that's our roadmap. Where are we going to go, and what do we think we should focus on? We go into a preliminary draft. Our preference is to draft the entire ordinance at the beginning of the project. We used to break it up, do it in chunks, and we do review in chunks, but we find that we have better conversation with the public when they can see what are the districts and what are the uses, what are the standards, and what's the process. So we try to do that in a fairly short period of time, and I want to talk about the time frame in a second. Then we take the whole thing out to public draft and engagement, and then we go into adoption. So as we initially submitted our proposal, we had this at about a 20 to 24 month project. Certainly, we know that that's a long period of time, an extended period of time. And so we want to highlight that as we get through the drafting and we get into that public outreach, that 16 to 20 month period may need to be adjusted. And we know that when we start hearing from people. If people come in and they're pretty calm, things are going well, we can shorten up that time frame. But this is something that we kind of engage in discussion with along the whole way. So we're saying about 2 years, can shorten it up if we need to. We do this iterative drafting to build consensus, and then there is engagement built into every task. So I haven't called it out. I'm trying to keep this slide visually simple, but we are always checking with the community and testing. So just in terms of content, we start with that assessment, so that's our roadmap. We draft zoning districts and uses. Then we do development standards. One of the things that will change with the Royal Oak zoning ordinance as you're going to more form-based for parts of the city and doing cleanup on the code is that some of those things that are now hiding in the 847 use-specific standards that you have in there, roughly. I have seen more, just to let you know. Henderson, Nevada outranks you in the number of use-specific standards. So. But you may not want to be there anymore. It doesn't sound that way from the plan. So we're going to need to move some of that into development standards that are more applicable across development. We'll talk about that in a minute. Administration and procedures comes last in that list, and then we go out to public review. So starting with the assessment, and I'm going to hand it over to Leslie in a second here. This is where we put our roadmap together. We take the themes from the master plan. We do a detailed survey of the city's physical form. We look for opportunities within the regulations to update, to modernize, to meet state and federal law. We propose a user-friendly organization. In the case of this code, there are, I think, a whole lot of tools and opportunities to make it more user-friendly. We do stakeholder and focus group input, gather this all together, and put together this roadmap report. We review it with the Plan Commission and the City Commission, and then we take it out to the public for comment. After that, we jump into drafting. I'm going to switch to Leslie. She's going to talk a little bit about how we get to form districts. You want to click yourself?
Oh, sure, thanks.
There we go.
Which one do I use? Okay. So the master plan is pretty specific about the locations that you want to use form-based code. I will say that I prefer the term place-based code, and I think that that ties really well with the place types that have been identified in your master plan. But just for the purposes of being consistent with the language of the master plan, I'll continue to use the term form-based. Right now, they're calling for the neighborhood nodes, the neighborhood Main Street area, the activity centers, the downtown, the mixed-use corridors, and I believe Woodward as well. I think that we may also want to consider form-based, and I'll talk about this in just a second, along the neighborhood edges, along the corridors as well. So a big part of my process is sort of really getting to know the community. The first step of that is to really understand the master plan. And so this image shows that future land use map, which again, the term place types is used sort of throughout the master plan. And I think that's really important. Very rarely do I have the opportunity to work with a land use map that's this clean and this well done. My issue usually is that commercial corridors are zoned with one, C zone up and down them, and nobody has taken the chance to look at the fact that many of those corridors are actually residential, and that zoning is, inappropriate in those locations. And so this idea that you've created these nodes along the corridors is really helpful. So I would really use this map as the starting point. However, what we do need to understand is that your current zoning is overlaid on that map. You've got people that live or work or have businesses along those corridors, and so we need to make sure that we're paying attention to what their current zoning is and making sure that that future land use is the future. We got to figure out a way to get there. And then the third sort of layer of my sort of process is to make sure that we're looking at what's on the ground. And one of the things that I love to do is I spend tons and tons of time not only walking and driving around the city and getting to know the building forms in your city, but also using Google Maps to make sure that I understand each building type that is existing within those form-based areas. So we'll do a very intensive look at all of those building types, identify them, and then help to build the code based on that. So again, it's those sort of layers of what you want it to be in the future, what it is zoned right now, and what people are relying on right now. But in addition to that, what is the current form and how can we see that translating to your future? And that to me really is what form-based code is all about. It's really understanding your building form and what your expected building form is to be in the community. From that, Elizabeth referred to making sure that the code is easy to use and easy to administer. I firmly believe, having done this for a very long time, that using building types is a great way to regulate your code, regulate your places, especially when you have a pretty clear vision identified for all of those places. So this slide illustrates how I would regulate a building type in a particular location. So this is what regulations could look like, using images to convey the idea so that people understand and can talk about what they expect to see in that location. If we're using, for example, a building type that's like a storefront, everybody can kind of get their head around what they expect to see in that location. Then we can build the code around that using images, graphics, and keying very specific metrics to those graphics so that you can see exactly what it is that you're expected to do in those locations. That is to say, we're creating very objective and well-tested standards, because one of the things that I also love to do is for many of my clients, I will help them to, for the first year, to review projects based on the code that I've just written, and it really helps me to learn what the developers are putting forward and where the code might be short and where the developers aren't really understanding what it is that they need to do. So very well-tested objective standards. And again, the idea here is to create a code that is really easy to use, really easy to understand, and attractive for people to flip through. Another sort of focus in almost all of my codes today, and not surprising here in your master plan, is this idea of middle housing and that kinds of housing types that are missing from your community or that are there but are missing from your zoning code. And so I have done several projects where I've created specific building form regulations for those types of buildings, those missing middle housing types, so that they can actually be introduced into different locations. And this is a hot button topic across the country. I'm actually dealing with that in my community right now, where they're trying to create new and additional housing types within my neighborhood. And so I think that it's very important that we understand what the form of that could be and where it's most appropriate within your community. I think that neighborhood edge area, and according to your master plan, is an excellent location for those kinds of things to happen. So again, this is using images, diagrams to convey the kinds of things that you could expect in that location. I'm going to turn it back to Elizabeth.
So we'll pair the form-based districts with an update of the city's traditional districts so that the non-form districts, Leslie and I have been having conversations about where the overlap could be and how the districts could work together. Our most recent project together was for Billings in Yellowstone County, Montana, where we did sort of that mix of traditional districts and form-based districts. And the city, I think, was pretty happy with it. They saw a lot of development take place afterwards. So we're talking neighborhood residential, neighborhood edge, and those could overlap industrial and parks and schools. Wrong button, hello. We don't let me loose with technology. Okay, so we took a look at what's going on in the city. So 71% of your current land use, 71%. So that is the bulk of what you've got going on here. And when the new code comes through, that's also the bulk of what your staff processes in the residential districts. Are residential. So what the plan says the city wants to see are housing options, accessory dwelling units, and incentives for attainable and affordable housing. So in order to get there, we want to understand first off, what are the major costs of getting to housing options, ADUs, and attainable and affordable housing. And the costs aren't things that live in the code, right? Major cost is land. construction, labor, materials, and infrastructure. And so we look at the pieces that we have some control over in the regulations and try to figure out where we want to make adjustments. So that could be adjustments to dimensional standards. It could be allowing, more dwelling units on a lot, exploring a density bonus program, thinking about, 2 or 3 units on a lot that could really only have one in locations where that's appropriate within the city. And then speeding up the review process, particularly for affordable units where time is really money if you're seeing this take place in the city. So we took a look at, we took a look at just kind of what's in the code right now. And this is something that cities are struggling with, and I think Leslie touched on this. When you're built out, it's hard to figure out how you're going to bump up density. You're built out. So where do we go with that? What is going to make people want to acquire property and turn over the housing? And what is going to make homeowners want to add that ADU? So we look at the dimensional things, like we do a preliminary look at what are current lot sizes, fairly large. We could shrink those, and in a way where someone with a larger lot could subdivide, could sell off, or could put a second unit on, particularly if they have a frontage or, have alley access. We look at reducing the setback requirements. So we're looking at all the ways that we can find within the regulations to make that land go farther. That's where the money has been spent, and that's where we want to see the housing. We look at allowing ADUs on any residential lot with single family, any residential lot with duplexes. That's something we see fairly often. Some communities want to talk about allowing a second principal use on a lot. So let's say I have a 10,000 square foot lot and my house is on there in a way that I could put another house on there. What we've done in other communities is say, you can do that. We'd like to see that second house deed restricted as an affordable unit, and that might make it appealing for someone that is doing affordable units to come in and build. And then finally, something we saw in the regulations was linking multifamily dwellings to minimum lot sizes per unit. And we think you might want to just walk away from that. It ends up taking up more land than it should. There are a lot of things in the current regulations that take up more land than they need to. Second thing we'd like to see is updating the permitted and special uses. First off, going from the laundry list to a table. I'm sure that we're not the first team that has told you that's going to be way easier for everybody to use. Wayne will say, this is the first thing developers want to see. What can I do in my district? What's the second thing they want to see?
Where can I put my business?
Where can I put my business?
Yep.
Same table.
Yep.
Yeah. So.
Yep. And what can I do with my property? How
Yeah.
do I change something about the building or, the physical.
What's going on there?
Yep.
Yeah. So we would want to move you forward, but we'd also want to get in, like I said earlier, and to have a conversation about moving away from doing so much as special uses as that extra review process. If we can move some of those things to permitted or by right uses, that helps development go through faster, and it moves away from that feeling of it just takes a long time to do this. Next thing we'd want to touch on are development standards. Current code has landscaping and screening, some pretty minimal environmental performance standards, and off-street parking and loading. We would want to clear up and do some site layout standards for non-form development. To be clear, in the form-based districts, that all gets kind of cooked into the regulations. But for any places like residential multifamily, where we could have multiple structures, we want to get that in there. And then the other thing that we think is missing is an entire section on connectivity and mobility. How do we make sure that as site plans come through, applicants are making those walking connections, the bicycling connections, the things a plan clearly calls for that you want to be able to check off on a site plan. So I'm going to turn over to David to do a couple slides on administration. Leslie, would you mind giving this to David?
Thank you. So yes, our next 2 slides concern administration processes and general standards of approval. So when we look at this, we want to first ensure that we have the understanding of what the city is capable of doing in a review process, such as what kind of capacity do you have, the resources and expertise in order to administer and enforce the code that we write and adopt. For instance, you just talked about the traffic impact analysis for the Kroger site and whether or not to require that in the third-party review. You may want to consider having a required traffic impact study when you have a certain traffic generation, just as an automatic standard. In that point, do you have the reviewers on call, on contract, that you can have that third-party TIA review, or is that something you need to bid out? But we want to make sure that we understand when we write something that you have the capacity to have your staff review it, work through it, or have a contracting consultant to help you with that. Along with this administration duties, we want to have a very clear understanding of the processes and the experience of your reviewers. So I hope to get to know all of your reviewers by name and know their roles in the process. So you're going to have folks like the fire department, engineers, planners, zoning administrators. All these folks have their own perspectives and experiences through your review process, and it's going to be very important to this process to understand their experiences, to see where they're parts of the code that might trip up both an applicant as well as a reviewer, and to really just walk in their shoes. I mean, I do it for a living every week, but I want to know what the experience is of your reviewing staff. Kind of along with that, reviewing staff reports and meeting minutes. I had a chance to look at a few of Mr. Murphy's reports, as well as enjoyed watching some of your recent meetings as well. That really, we would do that a lot during the initial phase, the audit and assessment portion of the process, to really see how staff is analyzing a development and review, how they're incorporating the master plan compliance and your standards of approval, as well as looking at the minutes and the videos on how you as a planning commission have treated developments. So I think you as a group, it's very impressive to see how you're working together, referencing the master plan and really having a thoughtful conversation. So we want to be able to carry that into our review process and standards, and really capitalize on your experiences in reviews. On the same frame there as well, the assessing reviewer wish lists, ordinance markups, or zoning administrator interpretations. So I'm assuming staff members, a lot of them have a zoning ordinance with a lot of red marks on it, notes, and maybe a historic interpretation of how something's been handled that's not necessarily in the code. So those are the things we're going to want to see early on in the process, just to ensure that we know what the challenges are, how things have been interpreted, because we could look at a code and interpret something a certain way. A developer or a member of the general public can look at it in one way, and then staff may look at it a certain way. But there's reasons why staff has looked at certain sections and made consistent interpretations over time, and it's going to be helpful for us if we're able to work with you to understand that. I think when I saw the meeting from a month or two ago, as you were working through the zoning board's the number of variances that they had concerning the 3,500 square foot building maximum. That's a perfect example, because we want to see what are your common variances? What are the common types of relief that developers are seeking? So if we see that you've received 30 applications for a waiver on the 3,500 square foot maximum building house requirement, that's certainly something that you need to address during this code, as well as there may be others that are not as extreme as that one. There may be a couple others that you see a couple a year or a couple over the last couple of years, but we want to know what those common variances and requests for relief are. With that, we also understand there's some other staff priorities or other things on what I call the wish list. We understand that the adult business review is something that's going to be important for this process, as well as I'm sure there's another list of staff priorities which we would love to hear about during the initial phase of the process. And then just as we consider the duties and administrative roles, during that initial audit assessment process, we also want to consider the general user experience working with your code, as well as the professional user experience. So When we talk about professional users, as Elizabeth mentioned, we may have roundtables or small group discussions. In those cases, we like to gather natural groupings of folks who might be able to have very informative conversations with us. So, we may group engineers or architects or landscape architects in one group, attorneys or other applicant representatives in another, just to get their perspective on the process. And with those, and this is something to discuss, but sometimes we actually like to do that without staff or officials involved. In some cases, we'll get more open and honest opinions from those user groups if staff or officials are not at those meetings. But other times we have staff involved, and it can work both ways. But that's certainly something to address. Okay. And then review procedures, and there's a few bold ones, but these are all equally as important here. So with our procedures, we want to ensure clear and simplified processes and procedures, as mentioned. Plain language. We want the language that the developer can understand, staff can consistently interpret over years. As you may retire someday, as we all hope we will. The next generation of planners, we hope that everyone's making the same interpretations, and that everyone has a common understanding and common interpretations. I like to write ordinances and processes really almost as a user guide. We have some communities that ask for development application manuals, and those are really kind of translating the code and kind of saying, well, here's the way you do it, but here's what you have to know. And working with a client recently, we just wrote the processes so clear that we talked about a manual. I said, you know what, you can just take the 3 pages for site plan review and just put the application on top, and it's pretty much the manual that we're discussing. So we want to write it in a way that you don't have to translate it by a separate user guide or a separate manual. And also with review procedures, this certainly should be bold as well, but as we work through the process, discuss with staff, planning commission, and council, assessing the delegation of authority. So I believe all site plans go to the planning commission now. There may be things that you're seeing and that everything's checking, all the boxes are checked, standards are met, requirements are met. It's good. So should that go to the planning commission? So I think that's going to be an interesting conversation. A lot of communities struggle with delegation. But as a code becomes more predictable and clearer, that's when a planning commission a lot of times says, you know what, yeah, maybe we don't have to see just by right site plans anymore. Let's just stick to special land uses and rezonings and more of the discretionary type review. So that's going to be an important part of the process to streamline and find some opportunities to make this a clear code. And then the general sequencing. So I understand that projects do get held up sometimes for several months based on the review processes and the sequencing of reviews. I'm sure you've run this case where someone may need a variance or they're looking for relief, so they need to either go through a PUD process, a conditional rezoning with adjustments requirements, or you would send them to the zoning board for variance. So we want to make sure that we understand the sequencing and make sure it has a logical approach. Personally, I like to make sure that the variances are secured ahead of any sort of planning commission site plan review, just so that the planning commission doesn't have to make a decision contingent upon a ZBA and so on. And then, based on my understanding, you also wanted to reduce some of the discretionary reviews, like planned unit development and conditional rezoning, with those modifications. So, like as I said before, as a code becomes clearer and improved, maybe you won't have to use planned unit development as a tool. Obviously, all of us enjoy the planned unit development process because it gives us a way to consider good development that our code would not otherwise allow. I know you guys have used it to your advantage. I've reviewed tens and maybe 100 PUDs in my career, and it is a good Band-Aid for when your code doesn't anticipate a very innovative development that implements your master plan. So we may, based on your guidance, delete the planned unit development provision altogether if we have a solid, clear code, or you may keep it for limited application. And then the conditional rezoning with the zoning modifications, that may be something that you don't need anymore. And lastly, it was mentioned the special land use designations. It may be something to where, as was said, you push more of these toward permitted land uses. And then those that you have left as special land use, maybe those are only concept plan only. So similar to your preliminary review of a PUD, you're just looking at the overall layout, the use, the characteristics, the operational aspects, and maybe that's all you look at as part of a special land use and not detailed engineering. And that's a lot of times the development community will really appreciate that too, because they're not putting in $50,000, $75,000 into planning and design that they don't even know if they're going to get an approval. If they don't know if the planning commission is going to say this is a great spot for a gas station, this is going to be a great spot for something else. So the special land use, we might want to reduce that number as well as consider concept plan review. I know you recently went through the Family Feud case, and that was a indoor entertainment, and those are the types of cases where if it's indoors, if there's nothing, if sound's not an issue, if there's not any crazy hours of operation, that could have been a perfect case to where it's just a by rights staff approval of a change of use rather than at the planning commission with a public hearing. But again, these are important conversations that we'll have. Lastly, I've probably talked too long here. We'd like to incorporate some reasonable level of non-variance flexibility. So a lot of times development standards like parking, landscaping, lighting, things that just to keep up with industry standards or just maybe a different type of landscaping that is equal or comparable, that should be able to go through a non-variance process. You have maybe a set of standards or considerations that's not as strict as a variance process that either staff or probably the planning commission could consider during a process.
And for purposes of legal, I think the way that we have it proposed is pretty consistent with what we do, whereas Elizabeth mentioned, it's really collaboration with the team, not only those who are on this team, but those that are with the city. The sort of important part there is, of course, that nothing's really black and white. So the way that we sort of see these pieces come together is that often during that early initial assessment, we're going to find sensitive areas or land uses for which are regularly either decided in Michigan state cases or federal cases. And we're going to sort of highlight those for the team. Particularly, many of them are known signs, adult uses were mentioned, MLCC licensed uses with respect to preemption or other considerations. Those things are then discussed as part of the team. If there's any initial concerns, I think there has to be collaboration early on with city staff and the city attorney's office. And then our role sort of changes as you get through the middle of the process, where we would obviously, as Elizabeth mentioned, sort of waiting for them to identify and flag those things that as staff and as the stakeholders looked at, we really need to assist and normally find a solution for which is going to comply with the law, I think, as opposed to generally telling anybody no. That kind of brings us to the last piece of the puzzle, which is really when you get all the text put together, just doing that final review and making sure that nobody's got concerns with the way the text is prepared and that it's compliant with both those state and federal pieces. The only other things that are sort of important, Dave already talked about the process and the streamlining. We do a lot of that for our clients as well. We have a lot of the same issues where when processes are broken, they often turn into unnecessary litigation. So if those things are highlighted, it really is going to be important to sort of flag those, get input from city staff and the city attorney's office, and then ultimately we're here to make sure that the product complies with Michigan law when it's sort of actually enabled and enacted. So we'll look at the engagement process, yeah.
So I'm going to show you one slide here and skip the rest of them. Public engagement in a code project really falls along a continuum. And we have to figure out where we are and what information we need to share and what information we need back. And that's how we figure out what we want to do. So if we're just in a place where we want to inform the community about changes, hey, we're going from 6 zone districts to 10 zone districts, we can do that on the website or with a fact sheet. If we need to have a deeper conversation about, are you going to be upset if your neighbor puts in a 2-story ADU? That's a deeper conversation. Then we might get into kind of along this continuum, involve and collaborate. And so we've lined up the approaches we use with what kind of conversation we want to have. And we can come back to this if you have specific questions about where we go with that. So I'm going to give the rest of this to Wayne. Maybe. There we go. Have at it.
Great. So I'll skip over bullet points. Like I've said before, we know each other well. We've been a long-term service provider of Royal Oak, and once this project is over, we will continue to be a long-term provider. We're interested in the long-term performance of this project. Just to highlight codification services, as a provider on this, not only are we going to be able to give you some state-of-the-art tools that do a really good job in representing the work products that come out of this code and the day-to-day utility and performance of this code, but also continuing services. I want to highlight that taking on state-of-the-art tools does not require learning completely new ways of doing things. We will continue to have the type of legal expertise, specialized legal editors who know Michigan codes inside and out, who have worked with your city's code for a while. And we understand the linkages that are often in place between new code and other places in your existing municipal code and your community development processes. So eCode 360, even though that's a tool that most of you have probably seen or used before, there are features that I like processes like this where I get to go in front of different users of the code in a community than some of our traditional users, because we have features that in many cases are not even, they're already free. They already exist for you to use. We have features like trackback, which allow you to take a look at, as you amend your code going forward, where did those changes take place? Archives. If 3 years down the road you run into a legal concern, eCode 360 already offers that archive ability. So I just want to put a placeholder in, regardless of any decisions, that I would like to continue this relationship and have those communications going forward about features of the usability of this great new code you're going to get. Again, one of these is the app. That's unique in the field, having an app that works on iOS or Android. You can go to either store and download a search app. So this new code, regardless of any amount of graphically rich content, the tables that I do love to see, tables are fantastic. That's why we've put all of this effort into our publishing capabilities to rise beyond the days of simple black text on paper pages in a big code book. We really have adapted and really grown, and we've gone so far as creating an app that you can use. And that's no cost. That's one of those things you can get today. You can go get that app and do code searches. Also the API. I'm trying to connect, as being part of the ICC, I want to connect our ability to connect all things community development oriented. So from a technical standpoint, if you have permitting, you have any third-party software you're using in community development, we have the ability to take this new code when it's created and share it through an API with that third-party software. So again, that's something to reach out as the existing provider. Really exciting. I want to talk about, this is actually new news. We will have AI working for eCode 360 in first quarter of 2026. So the ICC has been teaching its own proprietary large language model since 2023. That's because as the preeminent building life safety code provider, ICC has zero tolerance for mistakes or any shortcomings or anything but perfection when it comes to referencing codes, right? They are the standard bearer. That also applies to general code with zoning codes and with municipal codes. I have actively been the zoning subject matter expertise teaching this, adding to this large language model specifically for zoning codes since early this year. And we're very close. We're on our 5th iteration. And just as general advice, just be careful about any open models. If you use anything like ChatGPT, or I've seen there's been a big trend with communities to go with third-party federated searches of their websites, which does reach into the code content. Be very careful, because we've been doing this since 2023. We haven't been doing it for 6 months. We've been doing it since 2023 because it takes a while when it comes to codes. I'll tell you, you will often get correct information with a lesser large language model, but you won't get complete. That's a free bit of advice for you. Be very, very careful when evaluating AI results because it will initially look like a good result, but it's not complete. It may only reference one mention in the code. It may not reference multiple codes that speak on a certain topic. So anyway, we've put a lot of sweat equity into making this AI large language model actually work for codes. You understand the legal liability when referencing codes and the dollars are at stake. It's worth going with a good one. Enhanced graphics for zoning codes. We've invested a lot over the last decade in making sure that some of the beautiful graphically rich codes that were shown tonight come through with a legal publisher. So we've been in business since 1962. We stand with anybody as far as being able to update codes, host codes, build codes for people. But when it came to graphics, about a decade ago, it was a little rough. But as we have upped our game, brought in the right people, the right technology, the right applications, and most importantly, formed the right relationships with code authors who are creating this content, we've been able to partner and prove that we can do things like support formatted tables. We can support multi-column layouts with a lot of detailed information and not saving them as images, but saving them actually as content that can be searched. That's very important. They're not just pictures. So when we have these columns of lots of information in the columns, it's all readable in searches. Being able to do things like search image captions, very important to the user. General Code has proven experience with both Clarion and Codemetrics when it comes to graphically rich content. These are 3 examples. You can see this is actually displayed on eCode 360, and the layout would look exactly like what Leslie shared with some of her form-based code content. We're able to replicate that, but also layer on all of that functionality that we offer as a professional codifier. The MapLink interactive zoning map, like Elizabeth said, I'd say 80% of zoning inquiries from the public is what can I do with my property or where can I put my business? And MapLink excels at that. It is a simple interface. We curate the code in a way where people can ask those questions simply by typing in an address, clicking on a parcel on a map. You can learn those things. If you go to the categories, let's say you want to put a drive-through restaurant in, you click on commercial, you go in, choose drive-through, the map, all of the parcels will drop off. If that's not an allowed use, you can drill down and get a property report, goes into the zoning in more details. What are the allowable uses? What are the dimensional requirements? And then any associated procedures. When we build one of these sites, we go through your development procedures, document all those, tie those, create cross-references. You can see any live site rather than give you a demo. If you go to generalcode.com, if you go to the code library, you can go to the MapLink sites and you can look at any of the sites that we've shown. A really good local one, the semi-local regional one, is go to Holland, Michigan. It's one of the better ones that really shows well because their code is rather robust. It's got a lot of kind of everything that goes into creating the architecture behind one of these sites. It's a good one to look at.
That's it. Okay. This doesn't account for all the time we've been talking to each other over the last few weeks. So we're going to be quiet. We're going to take questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Are there questions from the panel for our presenter? Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, just a quick question. How do you typically address the pros and cons of, I'll say, proposed changes to the zoning ordinance? So if you came in and said, hey, we're moving to form-based, I mean, that's a pretty high-level one. But as you can imagine, as it gets more specific, as things change, whether it's a change of use or something like that for a particular parcel or for a neighborhood or for a node or whatever it may be, especially when the residents are involved, how do you go through that process? How do you walk through that process? How do you speak to it?
I will say that the process of doing form-based, especially in places that you love already, places that you want to stabilize, the beauty of it is that we're modeling after your existing. So like places like your downtown or, nodes of mixed use that are already valuable, that can be a pretty easy translation for people. When they see what the current code might allow, and we can show illustrations of what the current code might allow that doesn't match that character with images of what it does. In places where we're expecting change, like if it's along your commercial corridors or you've got, single family that is maybe all rental and that's a location for your middle housing or something like that. I think that the key is making sure that we're designing it to incorporate those elements that people love. So if we can show images, again, of what you could see in that place that people, sometimes we'll use image preference surveying to let them select. For that middle housing project that I showed you, we had a huge, I think we showed like 400 images of different kinds of middle housing and let people sort of pick and choose the scale and everything that they wanted to see. And we literally folded that into the regulations for those places. That really helps people to feel like they're involved and that, they've had some say in the writing of the code. So it's different for each specific area, but that's also the beauty of form-based in my opinion. And, Elizabeth and I have worked on several projects together, and we really like to look at every single place and determine whether or not we're trying to stabilize it and keep it, maintain it, or change it. And then if that change, make sure that we're looking to the community to verify.
Okay, I'm sorry, who had their hand up first? So I was making a note.
Thank you. So you kind of skipped over the community engagement part of your presentation. Who is in charge of that?
So Clarion will lead the community engagement, but it's Clarion. Thank you. Thank you. Clarion leads the community engagement, but it's something that we build into each piece of it. So like Leslie's answer just a second ago to the mayor about we need to do community engagement to draft form-based regulations, we would bring it in for that. We bring community engagement in for just about every section of the drafting, and we do it. So we find that people maybe want to get involved, but it is a little overwhelming. Hi, please come sit down and draft laws with us. Isn't a comfort zone for a lot of people. So we start early with kind of what we call learning sessions. So we'll put things on the website, videos that say, do you know what zoning is? Here's Zoning 101, so you can learn a little bit about this. We try to welcome people into the project so they feel like their opinions are something they can share and that we'll listen to. So we are lighter on the engagement early in the process, and we're heavier on the engagement later. We kind of think of it as like letting those issues sort of heat up so people will start paying attention to it. If we start out early and say, everyone come talk to us about zoning, people can find 40 other things they'd rather do. But when we get into the issues that are meaningful to the community and we have something for people to respond to, then we find that the engagement starts to catch fire a little bit more. And then so we start out broad, and we assess what we're hearing from people and, try to decide, can we resolve this in a big setting? Like, do we need one open house meeting and we all talk about, what is great missing middle housing or great ADU design? Or do we need to break up a bigger idea into chunks and maybe put together some focus groups or a working group to talk about a particular issue so we can share that information back out with the community? So we treat it as a live and iterative process. If we were working on this project, we'd check in with Joseph and his team and say, we want to try these 5 things in a few months, and we want to get at these issues. And then we would sit down afterwards and assess, did we get the community involvement that we were looking for? If we're light, we will go back out and try again to connect with people. Usually by doing that across the project, by the time we get to the end, we have some satisfaction, and we have some people that we've completely irritated but that kind of goes with it. And so, we take everyone seriously with their opinion, but we also try to be clear this isn't going to be a project where everyone's happy in the end. And so we will explain to people, why didn't we do the thing you wanted to do? We want them to go away understanding, even if they didn't get the thing that they were looking for. So that's, it's kind of a balance. And so it's, us checking in with you. Did we get it? Did we not get it? Is there someone else we need to talk to? And then it's us sharing information back. Here's what you heard. Here's what we did. And we try to build that in as we go through more and more as we get more people involved in the project.
So we have here in Royal Oak a communications director and a community engagement specialist, and not surprisingly, they are very busy already. What tool, and particularly when so much of this process is face-to-face, or requires people to be told they have an opportunity to do something. How do you minimize what services do you provide, or what do you do to help minimize the burden on our staff?
Yeah, we love working with the good communications team. That is just a treat. And so we prepare all of the materials. So we'll prepare the notices that would go out on social media, like, visually rich, sort of join us for this, or last chance to comment on the survey, or whatever. We get their schedules early. So we try to learn, do you guys have a 2-week lead time or a 1-month lead time? We build it into our overall project management calendar that we discuss every other week when we're talking with Royal Oak's team on the project. And then we make it our job to get them the information they need on the schedule they're working on, so we can get it out the door. We also love, if they give us feedback, we will share stuff early enough because they know what the community responds to. So, we'll provide 2 or 3 options. We could say this, or this. And we're happy when they, come back. We just had this happen in a project we're doing in Kansas, and they said, no exclamation points, more pictures, and this phrase works really well. And so fine, we reworked the material and they were able to send it out. And we had enough people show up at a meeting that we made the evening news, which for us is a huge success. So that we see that as just a real benefit that we want to take advantage of whenever possible.
Good. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Shar kind of hijacked my one question, but
It's almost been my question.
I know. Again, it was kind of skimmed over. I know we're kind of for the sake of time, but other groups have brought specific examples of what they've utilized and what's been good or what's been bad for really engaging the community, making sure that they feel like they're a stakeholder and their voices are heard. Is it graphic? Is it pamphlets aside from maybe separate websites or adders or things that you're going to provide that are sent out? If you can elaborate a little bit on that, of what you think for especially a community like Royal Oak, what would be good in that respect of what you would use to engage our community.
So I'm going to start this one, and I'm going to turn over to Leslie and David just for some short add-ons, because I know everyone sitting here has an opinion. So we always do a project website, and I apologize for not having that information available. We use maps like Wayne was talking about. We know that is one way that a certain demographic likes to get into the project, so we try to make that available early on. So like a story map or something along those lines. We have all sorts of materials, so we do flyers. We go old school on occasion and put stuff up in coffee shops. I had one of my best turnouts from a community whose code was from 1976. And before you're going to Revolutionary War, we put up a big disco ball and said the 70s called, they want their code back. And we had a lot of people who thought that was fun, right? So we do shoot for some humor. We try to post everything to the website so people can pull it down when they need it. We do the full range of, hey, we're just going to have focus groups, and we work with staff to invite people who should be at stuff to, okay, we're going to have like a 2-hour drop-in session that we'll do live, and then we'll follow it with a virtual session so no one has to feel like they couldn't make it. We've done materials that are do-it-yourself. So for Lawrence, Kansas, we did a meeting in a box. I mean, it was a meeting to figure out what character each neighborhood saw themselves as. So we put questions in, and we put interactive materials in, so your neighborhood organization could sit down for an hour and pull this information together and send it back, and you could do it on your own schedule, which was highly successful for that project. Other things we've done are incredibly painful 8-hour-long days where we've just said, we're sitting in City Hall, come talk to us. We've done drop-in mapping activities downtown, trying to get people involved. Certainly in a community that's as diverse as Royal Oak is, we would, at a minimum, go different places to meet with people. So we do, coffee with a planner, come sit down and have coffee with us. We usually try to make sure we have food at just about everything. I'm going to stop, actually, because I'm going to go on for days, and I'm going to turn it over to you guys.
And one comment, too, I think we can really carry the momentum of the master plan as well. We can assess what worked well for the master planning process, maybe model some of our public engagement plan after what was successful during the master planning process. So if there are things that would be helpful for us to incorporate, things that are events or activities that were successful, I mean, we could also incorporate those into our plan as well.
I just think we need to be sure that we're getting both sort of demographics, the people that are willing to look online and get their information online and participate online, have added so many people to our processes lately, ever since the pandemic. And then also getting to know people in person. I mean, one of my favorite things is the open house, where we can take maps and images and really have one-on-one conversations with people. So just as much as we're trying to learn the physical form and the geography of the community, we're also trying to understand the people in the community and what it is that they're looking for. And the two of those things together will result in a code that people are happy and hopefully excited about.
I think, and maybe for lack of a better term, you described what you engage in as kind of a front-loaded draft model, where you draft the code at the early process. Can you walk us through the exact point when, in the drafting process, where Michigan-specific zoning law is actually writing the code?
So I'll start and I'll turn it over to Chris. So the way we envision our team working is we'll be doing drafting, but flagging all legal issues as we go. Even if, even if I've done a RLUIPA exception, 16 times across 16 states, I'm still going to flag it, and we're going to send it over to Chris. So we want to know early in the process whether Michigan law has any special tweaks to it that we need to understand, because it is very challenging to walk back something once you've sent it out to the public. So I think that we're seeing Chris as a trusted advisor throughout that front-end drafting process, and he has some thoughts about how he could stay on top of what we're up to.
Yeah, I think I addressed some of this just related to sort of early on. I think you have to flag some of the issues. The one thing I would note about the premise in the question is the Zoning Enabling Act is certainly important as it relates to the conditions, the processes, and it does define for us the bodies and the uses, but we have to remember that no matter what, there's a lot of constitutional implications at play. I mean, zoning at heart is the property of balancing property rights against zoning. And so when we're doing that, it's federal and it's the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act that we're looking at. And it really is impactful right in the beginning. We like to really early on in that early assessment, there might be community desire uses for which are red flags, and we identify those up front. So it really, to me, at the start of the project, you're already essentially implicating and using the Zoning Enabling Act. There's no reason to go down a path for which we think there's going to be federal issues or state law issues, and we certainly are going to collaborate on those.
Thank you.
Woody, did you have a question?
He asked my question, actually.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, we're beyond 60 minutes. Does anybody else have any questions for our presenters? Okay. Hearing none, I thank you very much. Appreciate you all coming. I guess you came a ways here to get here, right? So we appreciate it, and we will. What's the rest of the process? We're going to
take a little break.
We're going to take a short break, and we are going to come back and talk about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
We need public comment.
What's that?
Public comment.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Appreciate your time.
Yeah, we're grateful
We
for
could
the
do that
opportunity.
after we deliberate, or after you deliberate.
Well,
I'm not
we'll do it after
deliberating.
yeah, we'll do it after the break.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, just making sure. Open meetings.
Whatever, all these features, it's usually required, right? But if you could say, hey, what I'm going to do is contribute to
All right. When do I trigger the TV cameras to come back on? How does
I
that
think
work?
your voice just did it.
Oh, okay. All right, we're gonna reconvene the special meeting here at 7:18 p.m. and we're going to open the public comment in a minute.
Say, I'm shooting a gavel the mayor.
I don't have a gavel.
It's true.
I'm going to make this entirely affordable.
Okay, folks, we're gonna restart the meeting. Thank you.
Sorry.
Wait, see, we can talk about that when after the public comment. I don't have a gavel. Okay, back on the record here. It's time to open the public comment section. This is a public hearing, so if there's anybody from the public who would like to come up and speak on the three candidates for the code writing consultants, please come on up at this time. And seeing no one in the room, I'm going to close public hearing. Bring it back to this side of the table. And Mr. Murphy, tell us what you envision us doing here.
I think a good overview of each is probably a good start. Probably this leads to some organic conversation that hopefully gets you to, whether that's today or at the next meeting, making a recommendation to the City Commission. When you are prepared to do that, there is a suggested resolution that's attached to the memorandum I showed on the screen as well, where you can simply plug in the name and their associated price, and then our office will work with the city attorney to draft up the final contract that would be provided to the City Commission for them to enter into contract, and we can then formally commence.
Okay, but just to make clear here, we have the option to deliberate tonight and make a decision in terms of a recommendation.
Absolutely.
And if we don't come to some agreement, what would be the next step?
I think we'll probably cross that bridge if we get to it.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, so let us open the discussion here. Does somebody want to, do you want to go through? Listen, one of the things is, you're the professional. You listen to these people, and you probably understand better than us. Would you want to give us your impressions or of the three candidates?
I'll reserve mine till the end.
Okay, but then would somebody else like to start with their impressions, Mr. Cooper?
So I think we had three very qualified candidates that came about. There's two I think that really kind of stood out the most to me, one being Zone Co. and also Code Studio. Or Zone Co. and Clarion, I apologize. Both have some local presence, understanding Michigan, and they clearly did their homework on us before they came in and presented. I think the end result of providing the information is a big part of it, but the information that goes into it is more important than how I think it's presented in the end. So I think between the two, and if we really want to, I guess, get to the nitty-gritty force ranking, I would say my preference would be Zone Code for number 1, Clarion for number 2, and Code Studio for number 3.
All right. Anybody else want to go? Next.
Sure.
Commissioner Gantini, go at it.
So I agree with a lot of what Mr. Cooper said. I think all three firms very qualified. My initial take with Zoneco was that they have a good local-based team, a lot of local knowledge. I think they were pretty strong in terms of the legal review throughout their process. Code Studio, I think, again, very qualified, obviously much more technologically advanced. And for me, that presents a little bit of a concern in the sense that, not that I don't think that that's valuable, and that's something that I think we need to look towards in terms of we're looking at something for the future, that seems to be a bigger leap forward for us from the baseline that we're coming from. And then lastly, I thought Clarion was, again, very well qualified. Honestly, to me, they were almost like a good hybrid of the two, so to speak, in the sense that I think, well-qualified firm, local knowledge, good legal background in terms of how they're implementing the legal review throughout their process. I think a little concerned about their community engagement process and how they would manage that. But if I had to score them in terms of ranking, I think I would rank Clarion 1, ZoneCo 2, and Code Studio 3.
Mr. Ellison.
Yeah, I think we were fortunate in all three firms we had. Are all extremely qualified, and I don't think we could go wrong by choosing any of them. But what struck me is the one that I with Clarion. They seemed to dig in a little bit deeper about us. They knew about us. I heard comments. The men talked about the Kroger project and some of the master planning projects that we've run into, and some of the displays on the board kind of dug right into questions that have come up with us. PUD programs and that kind of stuff. I just thought they came in more focused on what Royal Oak needs, and so they would be my number one.
All right. There's only 3 of us left. Who would like to go next?
So not surprisingly, communications and public engagement is the thing that really drives me. I know when you're a hammer, every problem looks like a nail, right? And I looked at Clarion. Their form-based expert was excellent. Really helped me. Not that I needed help, but really clearly articulated the benefits of it and its uses and so forth. They did not have as much experience in zoning as the other two. I mean, the other two are zoning, national zoning firms. But I was honestly disappointed in their community. They didn't have a communications team member part of their team here today, and skipped over the public engagement part of it in their presentation. So that leaves me at ZoneCo and Code Studio. Code Studio's tech element was very sexy, very interesting, but I don't know that I'm ready to be part of that grand experiment at this point. Yes, Clarion did some good boots on the ground research here, but the local connections, the local knowledge we had on the ZoneCo panel, plus their extensive experience and the fact that they've got a team member dedicated to community engagement would tip me over towards ZoneCo. I think with the others, with Clarion second and Code Studio third.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, you want to go next, or you want to?
Yeah, I'm just kind of recording a little bit of what everybody's rankings are, just to get a feel. We have to narrow it down. I think I agree that Code Studio, well, they're all good. I would think that they would, for me, be my third choice. So I think where I am debating in my head is between Clarion and ZoneCo. And like it's been said, my notes, ZoneCo came out and they have, it was almost like a coalition approach, right? They had a number of experts from different practices, most, if not all, local, which I thought was an advantage for sure. I liked Clarion's, like similar to Mr. Ellison, their knowledge of what we have experienced. At least it seemed like they did the most homework of the 3. And I think while they seemed weak on their presentation related to community engagement, I'm not overtly concerned because there's a community engagement, let's say, process or map that everyone has, and I feel like it's somewhat similar. Oh, we'll have charrettes, we'll do these technical things, right? The question is how good will they do them? And I got a sense, although they didn't explain necessarily, okay, this is what our prescribed formula is. I actually like the idea that it was a little bit more adaptable. And the answer they gave personally to say, well, we have to kind of see what the temperatures are and how we handle it, but we have experience doing these different things. So I took a different take on that. I wish I could dig into it a little bit more to be certain, but some of the answers they provided, like to me, the one question about how do you explain the pros and cons of a change? I think talking about the graphical change, getting people to visualize it, getting that piece of clay done before
that the community can actually see what it is before the myth is, like educating people what zoning is up front, and then have that piece of clay, and then go from there seemed interesting to me as well. So it's a real tough choice between Clarion and ZoneCo for me, so I'd rank them both 1.5. But I mean, I can be persuaded between those two.
All right, my turn. I'll probably talk a little slower here. First of all, I would point out that one thing that I think that, I'll get their names straight, ZoneCo, the first one, seemed to me to be good communicators. They certainly communicated good to us. They were confident, they were clear, so I take that into account, that they were very good at communicating with us. I think that I'm going to skip over to Clarion here. It's interesting that David, the guy sitting there, clearly did more homework than any other single person that we saw here, but I'm not sure if he was the best communicator. So I don't know how those things fit in. I would also point out that Clarion and ZoneCo, the first and the third, have the exact same technical consultant and the same legal consultant. So the difference between those two, those guys, you can set those aside. They got the same team. The local connections of ZoneCo emotionally gave me some, comfort. I remember when we were picking our last consultant, somebody here said, "Oh, Smith Group, they're got local," and I didn't follow that emotional little ping. Maybe I want to this time. I would just say that. I did also want to say about Clarion. I don't know if anybody else read their thing. Here's what they said about community engagement. Quote, this is page 3. "We can use our experience to help de-escalate the multiple tempests that kick up during a code debate or code update." So they put that in. I didn't see anybody else recognize the fact that people get pissed and we know how to deal with it. I don't know if anybody else said that. So they get a brownie point for that. But and I agree with Shar that when I heard the form-based code, we had the form-based code consultant on the TV, and I didn't understand a word he was saying. She was a little better, but what she said is, I'm going to show you, I'm going to take a picture, I'm going to say, here's what is allowed under the code now, and here's what's going to be allowed under the form-based code. I want to see that, okay? But we could ask any of them to do that. Maybe it's her idea, maybe, anyways, we can ask anybody to do that. So, anyway, so I'm more leaning towards ZoneCo. And I do want to say this about the guys who came in. I like the fact that he was honest and he wasn't blustery. He said, "Oh yeah, Detroit, it was kind of tough." Yeah. We had a hard time with that one. And then this one was pretty hard too. I mean, he wasn't full of himself. So I kind of like that about the guy. Okay, go ahead.
I just want to feed off. I had another note here related to Clarion that you mentioned, the pictures and like what could happen. You know what I mean? Like, and we have that conversation all the time up here. Like, you could have a fast food restaurant there. Like, careful what you're marching against. But the one word that I keyed in on is like the follow up with people. Like, you're not gonna there are gonna be people unequivocally that are upset with this. They're not overselling the fact that there's not going to be people that have a problem with change, but she expressed the word understanding. Like with people that may say, "Hey, I understand you didn't get your way on this. Here's the understanding of why." You know what I mean? And I think that that personal communication is interesting to me, coupled with actually, I didn't recall that statement in their book, but you brought it out, and I think that's interesting too. So.
Want me to chime in?
Yeah,
Okay.
I do.
Well, I've been kind of looking at this from two different spectrums. I mean, I'll give you my overall impressions. ZoneCo, I thought they had the best legal integration. And I respectfully disagree with the chair in that saying that ZoneCo and Clarion were comparable because they're using the same firm. I think the approach to it and the way they articulated it was different in that ZoneCo was more of a making sure that everything was dealt with along the way, whereas Clarion, it was a little bit unclear how they were going to actually integrate that with doing the front loading of the zoning. I thought that ZoneCo was the best cultural fit with a strong Midwest applicability. For context, I'm from Cincinnati. I know everything about Cincinnati, and you can find communities that are very much like Royal Oak outside of Cincinnati, very much like we are just outside of Detroit. And I think that comp can't quite be understated. Clarion, they're technically elite. I mean, they are one of, if not the heavy hitter in doing this type of stuff. But if you look at their resume, you're looking at Fort Worth, you're looking at Dallas, you're looking at Denver, you're looking at major metropolitan areas, which Royal Oak, that's a niche market for what they do. And if you look at it, you brought up, I think that David was very versed in what we do. Well, if you look at the bios, he's with Horizon Community Planning. He's not a Clarion employee. So they were more of a group of consultants with a core of Clarion, but with, bringing in David, who's a Michigander, Grand Rapids ties and things like that. But I just thought that they were technically elite, but maybe not the best fit for our own political environment. Code Studio, I mean, gorgeous deliverables. She showed that on the phone. That's something that, wow, look at what they just did. But the rest of it, I just really didn't feel like the backbone of the rest of it was there. If we could implant, what they were able to do on either Clarion or ZoneCo, that's game over. I mean, you pick that firm, there's no doubt about it. From a city attorney perspective, I don't think it's remotely close. In my opinion, ZoneCo gives us, at least in their presentation and what they explained, and doing further research into the three firms, I think that they give us the best chance at a premier defensible zoning code. And when you're talking about the zoning code, you're not talking about a small investment. In my mind, the money is a small investment. You're talking about $320,000 for 2-3 decades worth of a document that's going to be the core of how the city brings in tax dollars, brings in money. Everything that we do is going to revolve around that. And I really think that they knocked that out of the park, and there's no question in my mind about it.
All right. So now you, Mr. Murphy, said you were waiting till the end. Well, now it's the end.
Yeah. A lot has been said that I would reiterate. And that's the good news, is I think that all of us, when I was tallying the comments, and there's obviously a clear firm that clearly comes out on top, and that is a good sign. And I think that all the comments that were provided were terrific. I think that Josh's observations affirmed my commitment to ZoneCo as well. I could see myself working with any of these firms and any of their subcontractors, but from the actual RFP to the presentation, they rose above the others to be the top choice for me.
All right. Well, folks, go ahead.
So actually, I just want to say I really appreciate these types of discussions, because this information sharing and this debate has actually changed my mind, I guess. And what I was speaking specifically to Mr. Markham's statements around, Clarion being the heavy hitter and work for Denver or Dallas, and it's not a bad thing that they do that. But, I guess not until hearing that, you don't really understand that, well, we're not that. And the, buttressing those statements with the fact that, ZoneCo being just outside of Cincinnati, and there's many communities that they work for that are very much like Royal Oak, really speaks to, I think, the feeling that we all got about their local knowledge, their Midwestern knowledge. Until you hear it from a colleague, you don't necessarily really, I guess, at least I didn't, it doesn't resonate with you as well. And so I really appreciate you making those comments, because that actually does weigh much more heavily in my mind and changes my mind. I think, you couldn't go wrong with Clarion or ZoneCo. I ranked them Clarion as one, ZoneCo 2. But those statements on your part actually make me change my mind because I don't think we want to be a Dallas or a Denver or pretend that we are. And I don't disagree that that's probably where they're, most successful. And so based on that, I think I would actually change how I would rank them, and I would rank Zone Co first as well.
Yeah, I'll make a similar remark, and it was intentional, 1.5, because from my perspective, sitting up here as mayor, I have a different set of things I'm looking for in terms of creativity, in terms of how we manage the public. But the vote or the decision or the ranking that we have to make up here, at least in my opinion, duty as mayor, is to be considerate of things I'm not familiar with, like legal concerns. Who is going to make this the most defensible? Maybe I've been around 14 years and been privy and party and had to deal with the resolution of several different litigious situations based on our current code, and that matters a lot, but I have no expertise in that area to make an opinion. So my opinion has to be weighted by the experts in this room, and if we have an opinion that we can, from a defensibility point of view, from the expert, if Josh says that's the right thing, then I will add weight to the scale to Zone Co. If Mr. Murphy says, from an administrative point of view, he has some opinions as well that add weight to it, then that affects my decision and my vote as well. So what I'm going to do is support a decision that balances all perspectives.
All right. Does anybody else like to supplement their comments, or is the sense of the panel here that somebody should make a motion? Mr. Douglas.
I would like to make a motion. Whereas the City of Royal Oak held a sealed bid opening on October 29th, 2025 to hire a firm to develop a new zoning ordinance, and whereas the city received responses from the following firms, Clarion, Code Studio, and Zone Co., be it resolved that after a thoughtful review of the bid responses, the Royal Oak Planning Commission hereby recommends to the City Commission that it consider contracting with Zone Co. at a price not to exceed $325,000 to assist the city to develop a new zoning ordinance subject to a final negotiated contract.
I think you gave them a little bit more money.
I thought they were
They're close. 323,290.
Oh, yeah, that.
All right. All right, is there a second? Second by Mr. Cooper. Okay, so the motion on the table is to recommend to the City Commission contracting with Zone Co. for the amount not to exceed $323,290. Is there further discussion on this issue? Mr. Ellison.
Just a comment. I supported Clarion, and I still think they would be my top choice. However, as I prefaced before I talked, is that all three firms were excellent. They did a good job. And I think the input from both our attorney and community development director, I think it's important because these are the folks that have to work with these guys. So basing on the fact that I think all three are very well qualified, I'll be supporting this motion.
All right, very good. Any other comments before we call for a vote? All right, I am going to call for a voice vote. All those in favor of the motion to recommend Zone Co. for $323,290, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, hearing none, we have approved a recommendation to the City Commission for Zone Co. All right. Anything else on the agenda? We had public comment, so there is nothing else on the agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn? Or is there anything else that any of the commissioners would like to say on the record before we move on? All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, we're adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thanks for 2 nights in a row. Get used to it.